Everyone, this is Mr. Tanner. Have you ever looked at a tree and really thought about where all of its mass comes from? Because a tree starts out as a tiny little seed, and it can grow to be something that's hundreds of feet tall and weighs several tons. And it's always interesting to think about where does all that material come from to make a tree? And I think a lot of people just assume that that mass comes from the soil, that the roots must pull in all the matter that makes the tree. But that's actually not the case. That mass that makes up the tree literally comes from the air. And they get that mass in a useful form through something called photosynthesis. And that's what these notes will be about today. So first, looking at what is photosynthesis? Well, photosynthesis is a chemical reaction that converts the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, so in our air, into sugar. The energy that's needed for that reaction to occur comes from sunlight. So again, photosynthesis is a type of chemical reaction that converts the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere into the sugar that plants need. And that energy comes from sunlight. When we think of things that do photosynthesis, I think everyone immediately jumps to plants. Plants are kind of the organism that everyone thinks of when we think of things that do photosynthesis. But plants are actually the most recent form of organism to develop photosynthesis. The original organism that first evolved the ability to do photosynthesis a couple of billion years ago was a group of bacteria called cyanobacteria. So they were the very first photosynthesizers, and they're the reason we have oxygen in our atmosphere today. And then algae also does photosynthesis, and plants actually evolved from algae. So algae, plants, and cyanobacteria are the three groups of organisms that perform photosynthesis. So now let's look at the actual chemical reaction that is photosynthesis, and we can see how these different atoms are being moved around to generate the sugar that all plants need. So like I said, we have our reactants. And the reactants in this equation are carbon dioxide and water. So the only two molecules that plants need for photosynthesis to occur is carbon dioxide and water. And those reactants make, again, they need light energy, so that this light over the arrow represents the energy that's needed for this reaction to occur. But then they make sugar, which is C6H12O6, and as a result, they also make oxygen gas, which is very useful to animals on Earth. So this is the equation, but you'll notice it's not balanced. On the reactant side of the equation, we only have one carbon. On the products side of the equation, there's 6 carbons. So we need to balance this equation. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. On each side of the equation, we have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. On the left-hand side, we have 1 carbon, we have 2 hydrogen, and we have 3 oxygen molecules. On the product side of the equation, we have 6 carbon, we have 12 hydrogen, and we have 8 oxygen molecules. So this is not well balanced. So we can either start by balancing carbon or hydrogen. We'll just do carbon since it's at the top. We have 6 carbons on the product side and only 1 on the reactant side. So we need a multiplier. So to get 6, we need to multiply 1 by 6. So let's add a coefficient of 6 to the carbon dioxide, and we'll multiply that all the way through. We now have 6 carbons, which is good. We have 6 times 2 oxygen on the carbon dioxide, which brings our total up to 12. And then with the oxygen on water, that brings our total to 13 oxygens, and we still only have 2 hydrogen. So trying to balance out with multiplication 8 to 13 is going to be a mess. So let's balance hydrogen next and see what happens. We have 12 hydrogen on the reactant side and 2 hydrogen on the product side, and I know that 6 times 2 is 12, so we need a coefficient of 6 here as well. 6 times 2 hydrogen gives us 12 hydrogen, which is good. That looks balanced. And we now have 6 times 1 oxygen on this water molecule to add to the 6 times 2 oxygen on the carbon dioxide molecule. So 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 1 is 6. 12 plus 6 is 18. So now on the reactant side, we have 18 oxygen molecules. On the right-hand side, we still have only 8. So we need 10 more. We need a total of 18. So by adding a prefix, it might seem like 5 is the right prefix for oxygen, because 5 times 2 is 10 on this oxygen molecule here. But it's important to remember that we already have 2. So if I make 10 oxygen, that's only 8 more, because 10 minus 2 is 8. And we needed 10 more. So we actually need a coefficient of 6 on the oxygen as well. And if you look, we can do the math. 6 times 2, so, oops, not sure why that coefficient just disappeared. So 6 times 2 gives us 12 oxygens from the oxygen molecule, plus 6 oxygens from sugar. 12 plus 6 is 18. And everything balances out. So that's the chemical reaction for photosynthesis. And remember that photosynthesis is the process that gives plants, cyanobacteria, and algae all of the carbon that they need in the form of sugar. And it's why trees specifically can grow from a tiny, tiny seed to something that weighs thousands of tons. They get all of that mass from the air that we breathe. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.